Talkin Cougars is brought to you by Safeway. Come see what's fresh.
Welcome in to the final episode of Talkin Cougars for the 2024 season. Bump, do we have a doozy? A lot has happened since we were last here almost a month ago. If you can believe it, man, we've had coaches move on, quarterbacks move on, other players move on, a new coach hired, a game was played, among a million other things. Washington State football is going through a transition. We are experiencing it as we speak, and we get a chance to talk about it today.
Woo, yeah, you're right. It's almost, I'm glad that we waited this long because we let all this unfold. So now you and I can react and let the people know exactly, what we think and how we feel about this situation. But you're right. This is college football at its finest, the transition. There's only a few schools that are going to retain so many coaches and so many players every single year. It's about 5 to 10 of those schools that are locked in saying, all right, well, our dogs are going to be back. Wazoo ain't one of them, and we are experiencing that. We are in the middle of this thing, but you know what? It is what it is, and we'll try to make sense of this whole thing.
Yeah, we're going to do our best. We got to take a quick peek back at the Holiday Bowl that the Cougs went out and played against a really good Syracuse Orange football team. And, man, our Cougs, they were down a ton of guys, 25-plus players on the roster, no head coach, no offensive coordinator, no defensive coordinator. But guess what? Just like Cougs do, they came out and fought, punched Syracuse in the mouth, a blocked punt. That game was tight in middle of the second quarter. Honestly, I was there, Bump. Late into the third quarter, it's a 2-score game. Cougs are driving, and new Cougar QB Zevi Eckhouse throws an interception, and that's where the game started to get away from you. But, man, I was so dang proud of the way that team stood up in a really tough situation.
Yeah, I was proud of him as well. Zevi started off 7-7, over 100 yards and a touchdown. Big ups Culver City High School. He went to my high school, so, I was supporting my man out there. And it's just a tough situation. Like you mentioned, you're missing 25-plus players, no offensive coordinator. Your head coach is gone. You got to rally the troops. And I thought they came out and played well. Like, if you've watched Syracuse play at all this year, you knew that you're going to have to put up some points. Kyle McCord, I think, is one of the better quarterbacks in the nation. He will be drafted if he decides to enter the draft. He's looking for more eligibility. But that's a good ball club over there. And the Cougs came out and they competed. And honestly, going into this game, I thought there's no way we're going to be close after halftime or going into the third quarter. There's no way. But they showed that spirit that we love and that we identify with. So I was happy for those guys. You got Zevi playing a good game. Obviously, Kyle Williams going nuts over there with 172 of them things. No, it was bittersweet. You understand why these guys lost, but it was also nice to see them come out and compete with a really good program against the Orange.
You talk about your boy Zevi Eckhouse from your alma mater down in Culver City. 363 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown. I talked to acting offensive coordinator, the wide receiver coach, Nick Edwards, before the game, and he said, I want to get Zevi going a little running, get him in a little bit of a rhythm, because when he gets going, he starts talking a little bit, right? He gets a little swag to him. I noticed that with Zevi. I love that about him. I thought that was really cool for a guy that's played a lot of football at the FCS level, really hasn't played a meaningful snap this year, to come out and play the way he did. And I thought it was really impressive. Sure, he had some mistakes, but boy, can you fault him, Bump? It just is what it is. I thought he played fantastic. I loved his swagger. Reminded me of another Culver City guy I know, number 5, Michael Bumpus.
Hey, that's what we do in the 2 C's, baby. We go out there and we do our thing. But no, you're right. Imagine the situation that this young man is in. He realizes as soon as the material is gone that he's probably going to start this game. Threw 7 passes before this in real game time situations for the Cougs. But like you said, he had some experience at the FCS level, but there's nothing like playing D1 football against a really good Orange team. But he looked poised. But you knew mistakes were going to happen. There's no way he went through that game or would go through that game unscathed. But it was about just showing the world or the region that I can play some ball. Unfortunately, he's hitting the portal now. We'll talk about why later on in this this program. But it was a Cougar spirit, the perseverance, the let's go get it. You got Coach Nick calling the offense, the Tacoma native, the legend over there. It was fitting as tough as it was to see this team go through the last couple of weeks. It was fitting for them to come out and just play their hearts out, man. It was fun to watch.
And you got to touch on your guy. You mentioned it before, Kyle Williams. K-Dub sets the Holiday Bowl record, breaks Dez Bryant's record. Kyle ends up with 172 yards, has the touchdown. Looked like the best player on the field most of the night. Just elite speed, that competitive nature, man. I love everything from Kyle. The fact that he suited up for that game and went to work was so dang impressive, man. It's got to make you feel good as a wide receiver at heart and a Coug legend to see him step up like that.
Yeah, it was fun to watch him go when he takes that short screen pass to the house too, man. I got people texting me like, who is this Kyle Williams? I go, y'all just now watching Coug football? Come on now, you know about this guy. But no, 172 yards. He looked like a pro receiver, and I think that's why he suited up for this game. He needed to let everyone else know in the country that I'm ready to go. Like, come and get me. And he's done it all year. And I'm so happy that he got out there. I was happy for guys like Kyle Thornton as well, who got her done. There was a resilience and a freshness about this team because, as you probably did too, man, you're getting all these texts from people that you know in the industry and guys in college football, and all they're saying is, what's going on with the Cougs? What's going on with the Cougs? And you and I know exactly what's going on with the Cougs, but there are some players on the football field who didn't let that distract them, who still showed up and played some competitive ball for a while. I was thinking about you, man. I go, this must be fun for Brink up in the press box watching this all go down and adding your 2 cents to this whole deal.
Yeah, there's no doubt it was a really fun game to call and just to speak on some of the players and some of the veterans, guys like Kyle Thornton, guys like Kyle Williams. I mean, there's some guys that bleed crimson and gray in that locker room, and it's fun. It was fun to see them put it out, their heart out there for that last game. Let's hear from a couple of those captains, Kyle Williams and Kyle Thornton now.
And it's been a roller coaster, a lot of ups and downs. But to finish it off where a lot of things went left, and you just see the commitment of everybody, just the brotherhood and camaraderie of the team. It was something special, you know. And if I could do it again, I'll do it over and over and over with these boys.
Easy to keep track of the ones who don't want to be a part of the team, but the Cougs who want to be Cougs, they're a little harder to track, but they're in there. You know, being inside the locker room, there's a lot of guys in there that bleed crimson and gray, and they want to be Cougs for life. And there's something special here in Pullman and in the Cougs, and that's not going anywhere. You know, there's some fighters in here that aren't going to change. You know, they're going to carry on this legacy of fighting. I believe that. I know that. And so, you know, I know it's a little doom and gloom for the Cougs around now, but there's sunny days coming.
Coming up after the break, we'll talk about the next head man for the Washington State Cougars. This segment is presented by Cougs First. Think Cougs First for products, services, and hiring.
Welcome to the finale of Talkin Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus with my quarterback, Alex Brink. And you know what? We mentioned it to start the show. Lots of change has happened. You got Arbuckle going to Oklahoma. The Hawks fired their defensive coordinator. Mateer goes to Oklahoma. 26 players enter the portal. And now the Cougs have their head coach, Jimmy Rogers, out of South Dakota State. This man played football there. He was an assistant there, went to Florida Atlantic, came back to South Dakota State, and grinded his way to the top, won a national championship. My man has done nothing but win since he's been at the head over there in South Dakota State. Brink, I heard a lot of names going around when it came to the head coach search for the Washington State Cougars, but this wasn't a name that was thrown out there often. What was your initial reaction when you heard?
I'm excited about it, Bump. I think Jimmy Rogers has got a bright future coaching football. He's done a ton of great things so far at South Dakota State. He won the FCS National Championship in 2023, went to the semifinals this year, 27-3 as a head coach, and that man can coach ball. Defensive mentality, a former linebacker. He is a true leader of men. The things that I've heard is that he's a great culture builder. Think about this, Bump. They win a national title in 2023, and I don't think they lost a single player to the transfer portal heading into 2024. That's a guy that knows how to keep and retain players, develop them. I like the hire. He's a young guy, 37 years old. I think it's unique that they were able to kind of keep it under wraps during the search. I think that's a good thing. Kudos to Ann McCoy, the athletic director for Washington State, and all those involved. I think this is a good hire, and I think it's going to be a fit for Washington State.
Yeah, the thing that I keep hearing about Jimmy Rogers is that he's all about developing. And we know that that has to be key here at Washington State because you're not going to get the 5-star that is pretty much ready to go. Everyone has to be developed, but you're going to get the 3-star, maybe even the 2-star, the guy that is overlooked, and you have to develop them. And I think that's what you learn in a place like South Dakota State. I also love that he's from a smaller town. South Dakota State is not located in a big area. I spoke to their sideline reporter earlier on our show, on the Bump and Stacy show, and he said, look, there's about 30,000 people, 35,000 people in the town where South Dakota State is. And it made me smile. I go, perfect, about 30, 35,000 people in Pullman as well. And so he understands what that small town feeling is like. And you mentioned his age, 37. That feels like that's the new wave, right? Go get you a young coach and hopefully you develop. He signed a 5-year deal. My goal or my hope is that he plays out his 5-year deal and he brings Washington State to a place that we saw over the past few years. I assume he's going to bring some guys with him as well. The OC, maybe the DC, even players as well. We saw Zevi Atkins, who we just spoke upon in the segment before. He hit the transfer portal because he felt like, Jimmy was going to bring his quarterback as well. So there's a transition going on, and I think the Cougs found the right guy. There were a lot of names thrown out there, but when I saw that Jimmy Rogers was hired, I went back, I watched some film and did some research. I like what I see. I like what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the wild card here, you mentioned bringing players. That quarterback for South Dakota State, Mark Gronowski, is the real deal, Bump. 6'3", 230 pounds, threw for over 2,700 yards this year, over 3K last year in that national championship run. He's a true NFL draft prospect. That would probably be the only reason he doesn't come with Jimmy Rogers, I feel like, is that he would enter the NFL draft. But he's going to be one of, if not the highest rated players in the portal to date. And I think for Washington State, if you get Jimmy Rogers and you get the quarterback to come with him, that's big time. Another really high-quality receiver, Griffin Wild, could come with him as well. That's kind of the nature of it, right? You're seeing it with really every coach, including Jake Dickert, that go to new places. It seems like the players follow him. Think about over at Indiana, right? Coach Cignetti ends up bringing 20 players from that JMU team to Indiana, and they become a top 10 team, right? And so I think that's a little bit of the new wave also. You're right, though. I think a young coach who connects with the players, who understands what transfer portal and NIL are like. He's from the small town, but he's upgrading when it comes to Pullman, when it comes to facilities, access, visibility. And if he can truly build the culture and really come in and do that with a bigger platform, I gotta think, man, that this is one of those things that can really take off. And for Washington State, again, they get a guy that come in. You're right. Like if he comes in and he crushes it for 4 or 5 years and he moves on and goes somewhere bigger, that's fine by me. You know what I mean? Like I think that's what this is, right? If you go find a quarterback and develop him at Washington State and he leaves after 2 or 3 years to go to Miami or to go to Oklahoma, that is what it is. That's part of it. I think for Washington State, that's who we can be and we can be successful, which is a place for young coaches to develop and do great things and move on. And the same for players. And all the while, Washington State's finding success along the way.
Yeah, listening to you talk about him bringing his quarterback over or potentially brought me back to the years when Wazoo was considered quarterback U. You know what I mean? You got Bledsoe, Leaf, Gesser, Falk, U. At one point, Wazoo was considered quarterback U. Now imagine if Cam Ward, right? And Cam Ward, he comes over to Washington State, goes over to Miami, makes his money. He's going to be drafted top 3, top 4 picks. Now you got John Mateer, who comes over from a small school in Texas. He makes his money, goes to Oklahoma. We'll see how it works out there. If WSU can go 3 for 3 when it comes to developing quarterbacks, that's what's going to attract more guys. Now look, if you want to develop and become a good quarterback, go to Washington State. There's a system there that works. Jimmy Rogers has to do his own thing too. Right? He has to come in and make this his. But there's something that you want to keep from the previous regime is the perception or the allure of being able to develop football players, especially at the quarterback position. Because you and I know what happens when you start developing quarterbacks, receivers start to come over here too. And now you start to hit the receivers in the portal and in high school and get those guys here. So I just got rejuvenated a little bit hearing you talk about it. I was down for a bit, but once I'm doing the research and finding out who Jimmy Rogers really is and what he can bring with him. Also, the offensive coordinator aspect of this whole thing. If he brings his OC, I watched film on these guys. They do just about everything. They're going to run power and trap. They're going to go 2x2, 3x1. They'll spread you out. They're going to run the football with the quarterback. You'll have 2 running backs in the backfield. They do just about everything. I love that they manipulate the offense to fit exactly what they have as far as personnel. I think that is key at Washington State because you don't have the pick of the litter. You pretty much get what you get. And now you got to conform your offense, your defense to fit your personnel. I like that about them too.
Well, I'm going to bring you back down to earth just a little bit, Bump. My only question mark about Jimmy Rogers and this staff, if he brings the bulk of that staff from South Dakota State, not a lot of experience recruiting on the West Coast and certainly in that inland Northwest footprint. That is not something that typically you see at Washington State. Typically it's a West Coast guy that knows the recruiting footprint. That's the one thing I'm interested to see. But the one thing I will say about young coaches, right? Good young coaches, they just flat know how to recruit. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter when, they're going to figure out how to do it. But I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, man, we'll see. Lots of questions will be answered, and we got more to do. Just getting started here on the final show of Talkin Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus. That's my guy, Alex Brink.
This segment is brought to you by Cougar Collective. Back here on Talkin Cougars and Bump, even though we are in the new world of transfer portal and NIL, we still got to do a little recap on this 2024 season. We got to talk about our season MVPs on both sides of football, offense and defense. Starting on offense, who was your season MVP?
Offense, come on now. The kid with 172 yards in a Holiday Bowl and set a record beating Des Bryant. Let's go get it, man. I'm going Kyle Williams. It's got to be Kyle Williams. 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns, 70 receptions. He was the playmaker on the back end. If you needed a big play through the air, you look for Kyle Williams. My man was the screen game master, the sideline toe tap, the over-the-shoulder grab type of dude. When Mateer needed to make a play, he went to Kyle Williams. Man, I'm so happy that he played in that Holiday Bowl, and I'm so happy that he transferred over to Wazoo and made some noise, man. This dude is one of the fastest, most explosive wideouts in the game. He's gonna get drafted. Easy pick for your boy when the receiver's doing it. I'm going Kyle Williams. What did you think about Kyle, and then who's your offense MVP?
You know what I love about Kyle Williams? That young man was the heartbeat of that team. And exactly what you said about him playing in the Holiday Bowl, his competitive spirit. You know how it is, man. I loved seeing him on the sideline when the ball wasn't coming his way and the team was struggling. He's the one tapping the chest saying, "Get me the rock," right? And the frustration and the competitive nature and all the things that make a player like him great. I truly believe without Kyle Williams on that football team, you don't win nearly as many football games. I think he's the type of guy that lifts up a locker room. For me, look, it's got to be John Mateer. And I say that because we know what John Mateer did throwing the football, but his legs were such an X factor this season. And, you know, he's earned the opportunity to move on and go to Oklahoma and follow Ben Arbuckle. But what he did in his one season at Washington State was special. Led the country in total touchdowns. I just think about some of those plays, Bump, right, where he's getting sacked and he throws the defender off of him, spins out of it, and then makes a big throw, right? Felt like he made the big play at a lot of big moments. And, you know, for a first-time starter, that's really hard to do. So kudos to John Mateer. Like I said, you know, I think we should be honored he wore the crimson and gray. Sad to see him go, but such is life these days.
Man, I'll never forget, I called the Wazoo-Stanford game a couple years ago, and Wazoo was just killing. And this kid, John Mateer, gets in and racks off a 50-yard touchdown. I'm like, who the heck is that dude? And lo and behold, a year later, he introduced himself to the country and let everyone know he's one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the game. Like you mentioned, he's moving on. Not mad at the kid. You go get your money. Good luck over there in Oklahoma with Arbuckle. But to watch the things that he did from week 1 against Portland State, just hitting the scene, throwing the ball all across the yard. And within the first 4 weeks of the season, he switched his game up. There was a game where he threw for a bunch. There was a game where he ran for a bunch. And then you win an overtime game. It was just everything you wanted to see from a quarterback, you got from John Mateer. So glad we had him for the couple years that we had him. Happy for him. Good luck over there in Oklahoma. I think that's the natural pick for the offense MVP. All right, let's switch over to defense now. I'm going to let you go first, man. Who you got for defensive MVP?
You know, I'm going to go maybe a little off board here. My defensive MVP was Ethan O'Connor, the redshirt freshman cornerback that got thrown into action because Jamori Colson got hurt in training camp. O'Connor gets tossed in there. Big, lanky player. Coaches said he really matured in the offseason, but they really weren't quite sure, if he was ready for prime time. Bump, he was ready for prime time, man. He had the pick 6 against Fresno State that basically won that football game. Another pick against Oregon State. Had a couple more on the year. More importantly, he was locked down throughout the season. Typically, opposite Stephen Hall, who was getting challenged every week. Ethan O'Connor's on the other side. And I thought he really grew throughout the year. He was a guy that could play zone, right? They like to play that kind of cover 2 style, zone, play in the flat, get the pick. That's how he got it against Fresno State. But he'd also play man coverage, and he'd be physical, and he'd use those long arms. I thought Ethan O'Connor was the MVP, another guy that ends up in the transfer portal. I think rightfully so for a player, talented player out of high school, right? A little under-recruited, then goes and does great things as a redshirt freshman at Washington State. That's a pretty natural evolution that he'll get an opportunity to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I can't wait till he adds 15 pounds to that body. Once he adds some weight to him, man, he's going to be even more dangerous. I love that you pointed out that pick 6 that he had. That was a big moment for him. Mine is going to be Kapena Gushkin, man. I remember my introduction to him was a couple of years ago. I was sideline reporting for the Pac-12 Network. Washington State goes into UCLA, and he's got that pick 6, I believe, right before the half to kind of keep these guys in the game when the offense was struggling. And he did all the dirty work. You put him in the slot, he lines up in the box, he's making tackles like a backer, he's covering like a corner. This young man impressed me, and everything I heard about him was that he was such a team player. And that's what attracts me to guys even more. When I see what they put on the film, obviously this dude's a baller, but then when I hear about he's a good person as well, I love it. Gushkin, my defensive MVP for sure.
Yeah, that nickel spot in that defense was really tough to play because you were asked to do so many things. You had to defend in the slot and man coverage, had to play zone and tackle. You had to come on the blitz. You were a run support player. I agree. And Kapena Gushkin kind of carried on a long line of really good nickelbacks for Washington State. If you think back as far back as Parker Henry, and you think back to guys like Shalom Luwani and so on and so forth, I mean, that spot has always had some really talented players and guys that I think are true grinders, and I think Kapena was one of them and a really true Coug.
Yeah, he was, man. And some guys hit the transfer portal. You know what? And that is the reality of college football. So when we come back, we'll break down our thoughts on the portal itself. That's next on Talkin Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus. That's Alex Brink.
This segment is brought to you by Flat Stick Pub, local craft beer, mini golf, and old school fun. Final episode of Talkin Cougars. We are here, Michael Bumpus, Alex Brink, breaking down all things Washington State, and boy, has it been a lot in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Not only did the head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator move on from Washington State, Cougs hired a new head coach in Jimmy Rogers, and there is roughly 30 to 35 former Washington State football players in the transfer portal right now. We know about the headliners, man. There were guys that got in early, John Mateer, Budal Ukta, Ethan O'Connor, Fa'alili Fa'amoy, both D tackles were in the portal that ended up leaving, Ansel Dimbu and Khalil Laufau. So you had that early wave of what Bump felt like starters, right? Really high impact starters that were chasing the bag, and I don't blame them. Then you had a handful of backups that were kind of a part of that were looking for probably a better opportunity. But what's been interesting, I think, Bump, is that kind of as the bowl game ended, you've had a few more guys jump in the portal. What are your thoughts on the transfer portal and how it's impacting Washington State?
Man, first reaction, it hurts because you see what this team could be if they were able to stay together and kind of build off of what they did this year. But I also understand that there are universities and programs that have resources that Washington State just doesn't have. And they're able to toss some dollars at some young men and say, look, come here, play some football, and you'll get paid handsomely. And I can imagine what the the mental is for these young guys. Because B, when you're on campus in Pullman, you automatically have a connection to that whole situation. But you also are looking elsewhere because you see that the money that's being tossed around, the Shedeur Sanders making money, the Cam Wards, the Caleb Williams back in a couple of years ago, the young man at Michigan who just got guaranteed $12 million over 4 years. You want to chase that bag because it's an opportunity for you to provide for your family at such a young age. So I get to understand it. Initially, it hurt. But then it makes me realize, okay, this is just what Washington State has to be. It has to be a place that embraces, look, we're going to sit here, we're going to develop you, we're going to give you an opportunity. And if you find opportunity elsewhere and you're being paid, we're going to send you along your way. It is what it is. And John Mateer, as soon as he started balling, man, I felt it. I go, man, 4 weeks in, he's out of here if we do not put a competitive offer out there. And even if you do put a competitive offer out there, he might not take it. Dicker said before he left, like, look, we felt like we put a competitive offer out there. It was around $1 million+, and he just didn't want it. That just lets you know the type of coin you need to keep a team together. That just lets you know that college football is something different. You're not going to have that team from 2000, 2001, 2002 Washington State team, guys who gelled together, went to Holiday Bowl, went to the Rose Bowl, and developed. You can pay for your team now. So Washington State is going to have to take a different approach when it comes to building their program because clearly you can pay for your team, but not at the level of other schools. So what do? I think you focus on the high school kids and the guys that were at these higher programs looking for an opportunity to play. It hurts my soul because I'm a Coug and I want to see them build off of what they did, but I also understand the logistics of this whole thing. It is what it is. It's something we got to live with.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think there's two things for me that I think about, Bump. You know, one of them is that it takes a really strong leader of a football program to be able to hold the majority of the kids together, right? Because there's so many outside influences, the money, the flash, you know, the opportunity, all of it. I get it, right? But if you have a leader that is in it and that is committed to that place, I believe that permeates throughout the organization and that you're able to keep more. You're not going to keep everybody by any means, but you would have more of it. And the reality is Jake Dickert ends up taking a job and going to Wake Forest. Like clearly he was looking for an opportunity and maybe that wasn't permeating through the locker room that, hey, I'm here, I'm in it. If we're all here together, we could go do special things. To your point, if all those guys I listed stayed, plus the guys on the roster, what would they do next year? What would they have done this year if they hadn't lost focus those last 3 weeks because an offensive coordinator was looking at another job and guys were looking at other opportunities, right? Like there's a lot on the table there, but that's really hard because in the short term, right? The short-sighted mindset, right, is something that is not, it takes a lot of focus and a lot of maturity to be able to stay in that and a ton of leadership. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I think, you know, for Washington State, you mentioned it. The reality is you have to kind of embrace who you are, which is to some degree you're developing players along the way. You're approaching the high school recruiting differently than other people. You're looking at the portal still. In the end, Bump, and I've said this before, the number of athletes are the same, right? There's not more or less athletes. It's the same amount of athletes. So there's plenty of talent to go around. Washington State has always won with more of a mid-tier recruiting base, right? We're not going and getting the best. Right? And that's the same here. We're getting guys that fit the system and developing them. And now, when you think about the financial aspect, you just tie a salary cap to it, right, Bum? Your quarterbacks can get paid. If your quarterback's a stud, if he's all pack, if he's a guy that's competing at an All-American level, he's probably getting about $1 million, right? And so on and so forth. And you work your way down. And if somebody outplays that, then they move on, and that's fine. But guess what? You can go get another pretty dang good quarterback for $1 million, Bump. I'm pretty sure of it. So, you know, I think if you think about it like that, right, Washington State's playing with this salary cap and each player is slotted in, you're going to find a ton of Kyle Williams out there, right? You're going to find guys in the portal that need an opportunity from a different school or were a backup or were hurt the year before or whatever, and you're going to make the most of it with them. And so that's where I think Washington State can win with the portal. I think Coug fans have stepped up in a big way with the Cougar Collective to fund that and get money into the system. I think now with the university being able to fundraise and have that be a part of it after some of the state regulations got lifted last year, now Washington State has a chance to compete on some level with NIL, and it's just a matter of understanding who you are.
100%. Get us out of here, B. Get us out of here.
Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the Washington State football program and the athletic department and what Coug fans can expect moving forward. This segment is brought to you by Valley GMC. See you in the Valley.
The finale of Talkin Cougars. I'm Michael Bumpus with my quarterback, Alex Brink. There's been a lot going on. We touched on the transfer portal. And, Alex made some comments about the funding and what's going on financially when it comes to the athletic program. So this is my guys' time to put it out there, clear up some stuff. B, what you got?
Well, I'll tell you what, Bump. You know this because you grew up in it with me, that I feel very strongly about Washington State University, about Cougar football, and that led to, me sharing some of my thoughts about what I think about, the state of Washington State athletics, right? I was at National Signing Day, and I got a chance to sit down and learn a little bit about where the football program was at in the funding, what they're getting from the institution side, how the athletic department fundraises for scholarships, and the way they raise money for coaches' salaries. And I just found that for Washington State, we need to think differently. Bump, Washington State is a proud university, and we should not be ashamed of what this athletic department has done, what the football program has done, Rose Bowls, Heisman contenders, QBU, incredible receivers, great defenses, the Palouse posse, you name it, man. I am not going to back down from what Cougar football is, and I believe that, for that to continue, there has to be a continued investment by the university. And that was the root of my comments. And I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that it takes more than the Washington State fan base, right? Fundraising and giving their dollars. There has to be a commitment from the institution at large. And I think new athletic director Ann McCoy is doing a fantastic job leading the charge and finding ways to get dollars into the athletic department. And I think as Washington State moves forward, they're going to have a chance to be competitive, because I know the athletic department is doing their job in fundraising effectively, but they have to have help. Look, Bump, the reality is when the Pac-12 disbanded, right, and the 10 left, Oregon State and Washington State were stuck holding the bag. And they need help not only from their institutions, the universities, they need help from the states also, right? Those Mountain West schools that are joining the fold, they get help from the states to help fund their athletic departments because they don't get as much money from their TV rights deals. And there are all these sort of things, ways that you can help out an athletic department if you want to compete at a high level, which I believe as Cougs we do and we should. And that is all I want for Washington State, is the chance to compete, because these young men, these coaches work so hard for it, man. And if they have the support, they can do great things.
Man, you said it best, man. It takes a village, right? And it's all, the core of what you're saying comes from, like you said, the pride of being a Coug and wanting the tradition to continue. So I back you 100%. You're my guy. I appreciate you, man, and thanks for being a man of the people, man of the Cougs, man, and putting that information out there. All right, when we come back, we'll give you our favorite moments of the year. That's next, right here on Talkin Cougars.
Back here on the final episode of Talkin Cougars 2024. We're winding it down, and as we look back, we got to think about our favorite memories from the season. Bump, what was your favorite memory of 2024?
Oh, man, this was a good one. So I was calling this game with JB Long. To my left, my guy Alex Brink and the voice, Mr. King himself, are in the booth next to us. They're doing the radio side, we're doing TV. San Jose State, double overtime game. This is where I got introduced to Nick Nash. I go, who's Nick Nash? Right, this guy used to play quarterback, now he's receiver. You got Emmett Brown over there for San Jose State, who used to play for the Cougs. Mateer's doing his thing. Double overtime game. My kids were there. My middle child went to sleep in the middle of the game. He woke up at overtime and realized football was still being played. That was a big one, man. That was a huge game. I think it was a huge game for both sides, right? For San Jose State and for the Washington State Cougars. For San Jose State, they showed that, look, we can play with these D1 schools. And for Washington State, it was like, look, we can fight through some adversity and win some ball games. And when it came down to it, the defense came up with a stop. San Jose State was a crazy game. I felt like I was up until 1 o'clock in the morning calling this thing. That was fun to watch.
That's when I knew John Mateer was that dude, Bump. I'll never forget that throw he made right at the end of regulation, right? Remember when San Jose State goes up, goes up by 3, and then they come back, I don't know, there's like 30 or 40 seconds left, and Mateer rips a ball like 40 yards down the sideline, double coverage. Man, just stroked it, and then get down there, and Janikowski hits that big 50-plus yard field goal.
After missing a chip shot. He missed a chip shot before that.
That's right. It was a wild, wild game for sure. Well, dude, for me, and it's probably because of my affinity for Apple Cups, but that Apple Cup early in the season, a September Apple Cup for the first time in Seattle over at the Seahawks Stadium was wild. To me, the 4th and goal stop, Kyle Thornton, Captain Cougar, coming over the top and making the tackle to finish it. And I just tie that moment with Kyle Thornton at the end of the Holiday Bowl, talking about what it means to be a Washington State Cougar and about the guys in the locker that are still in the locker room, right? And that's a little harder to find those guys versus the guys that left, but they're in there. And I think about that moment when he made that tackle against UW, man. Bump, is there a better moment, right, for a fifth-year linebacker stepping up and making a play, a guy that's been wearing that Cougar head logo his whole career? That was a heck of a game. Another game, we got introduced to who John Mateer was with his legs and his ability to break the game open in different fashions, man. That thing was wild. It set the tone for the season, honestly, and what a start to get that Apple Cup.
Right, and you're playing the Apple Cup in September. It already feels weird, right? I don't have a hoodie on or nothing like that. And what I love about that play that you described is that UW blocked it wrong. They didn't execute when they need to execute, and we did. We got that Apple Cup. I live out here on the west side, so I got to hear the Huskies talk all that talk for about 6-7 years in a row. And for this year, I get to walk around and remind them that the cup is in Pullman right now. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. It was a weird year when it came to the Apple Cup with the timing and all that stuff. But the Cougs showed up at Husky Stadium. And was it Husky Stadium? Yeah, it was Husky Stadium, right? And showed out, man. So
Seahawks Stadium.
It was Seahawks. It was at Seahawks. I'm tripping. It was neutral site. But it wasn't a neutral site. That's why I'm tripping right now, because it wasn't a neutral site. Oh, neutral. We're going to play it in Seattle. You know dang well that that was Huskies home field. But I love that. Thanks for reminding me of that one. That was a good one.
Well, it's coming back to Pullman next year, so that's really all that matters. When we come back, Bump, we're going to put a bow on this thing, and we're going to talk about the future and some of the great things that are going to happen for Washington State moving forward.
This is Talkin Cougars' last segment of the 2024 season. I'm Michael Bumpus with Alex Brink. It is now time for us to do our best professor impression and give our Cougs a grade for the season. It was kind of weird, man. You start off hot, you get ranked, you get pretty low. We're thinking that we might have a chance to make the college football playoff, especially after defeating University of Washington. You beat Texas Tech, you're feeling good. And then towards the end of the season, you kind of take a nosedive and lose, 4 games in a row or something like that. I don't want to remember. I don't care. All right, but I got to give my grade, man. And my grade for these guys is going to be a B-. A B-. I'm going to go B- because this could easily have been a B+ A season. And I understand that people might want to give him a lower grade, maybe a C+. I can understand that. But for me, I think that the Cougs are never expected to do anything. They're not expected to compete, to possibly get double digits, to possibly be in the college football playoff. None of that. None of the above. They're not expected to do that. But you found some magic. You found some material magic. You had this defense taking the football away. You found a freshman in Parker who had himself some good times. Kyle Williams did his thing. You had a transfer in Hudson come over. This is the new college football. You're going to have to put a group of guys together just for this 1 year and hope that it works out. And then most guys are going to move on, or some guys are going to move on. So I was just grateful for the good run that the Cougs had, man. My grade, B-, almost a C+. What's your grade?
I'm kind of a softie when it comes to being a professor, to be totally honest, Bump. I felt like this was a B. I take a little bit wider lens approach to it. And you mentioned some of those young guys like Wayshawn Parker out there. I think about two true sophomore defensive tackles, Ansel Dimbu and Khalil Laufau. I think about a redshirt freshman corner. I think about a redshirt sophomore starting quarterback who hadn't started a game his whole career. Look, Cam Ward, a Heisman Trophy level candidate, left your quarterback position in the transfer portal, and you were able to come in and win 8 games. That tells me a lot about the way, like you said, the way college football can work. Washington State won with an incredibly young roster this year. And they had some veterans in there for sure. But the reality is they were able to fill in and backfill, and guys stepped up that were young. And I think when I looked at the roster to begin with and I talked to the coaches in the spring, there were so many question marks. They didn't know who the quarterback was going to be. They were concerned about the depth on defense. They didn't know who the playmakers were going to be on offense at wide receiver outside of Kyle Williams. And a lot of those questions got answered as you got into fall camp, and then obviously the season started. 8 wins was the number that I had it pegged at the start of the season. I wanted 10. I felt like it had to be 10 for Washington State to kind of maintain a level of relevance that they needed. And you kind of see that, right? You don't get 10 wins, your coach leaves, you lose some guys. That kind of is what it is. And now you gotta start over a little bit. But I think an 8-win football team was about right. The disappointing part, right, Bump, is that they had a chance to have so much more and they couldn't finish. And so I think, to your point, some people would feel like it's more like a C season, but I look at it more of where they started, and that feels more, in line for me. In the end, Washington State won 8 games. They had some really bright moments. They were in the national conversation throughout most of the year. They had some fantastic young men out there representing the Crimson and Gray. I think all those things are wins. And although we are looking at some transition with a new coach in Jimmy Rogers and players coming and going, one thing I know for certain is that Washington State football always puts up a fight, always stands up, and will always get out on that football field and compete with the best of them in the country. And I'm looking forward to 2025. And with that being said, man, it's a wrap for Talkin Cougars. Michael Bumpus, the legend, number 5. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Happy to do it again. Alex Brink, everybody take a look at some of our favorite moments from the 2024 season coming up.
Cooper to the right of O'Neal. Snap back, waist high, pressure coming, gets rid of it quick. It's picked. Budaluka with the interception, still up on his feet and is forced out of bounds.
What a great pressure package from Jeff Schmetti. He shows all-out blitz up front.
Here's the snap, 4-man pressure, trying to throw, and this is picked. It is Ethan O'Connor, no one in front of him. Will he take it to the house? 20, 10, end zone, O'Connor, pick 6, Cougs back on top.
What a monster play by Ethan O'Connor, the young redshirt freshman corner.
Here's the snap, looking to throw, surveying, under pressure, loses the ball, it's on the turf, the Cougs recover, Washington State hangs on to win this last team standing battle.
And the defensive line gets home again when you gotta have it, game over.